Hello students. Today I'm bringing you a lecture video on using concrete language. I thought about this a lot more after posting the video for last week and came up with some things that I hope will help you in completing more of your assignments, both the short writing assignments and also your narrative poetry assignment, the longer piece for the poetry unit, which you'll get that assignment later on this week. So we're going to be talking again about concrete language. Concrete language is specific. Instead of the abstract food, which is very general, anyone can think a different thing when they see the word food, or even more than bread, which is more specific than food but still kind of general. We have something concrete: toasted rye bread. It's so specific that there's a particular smell and taste that people who have had toasted rye bread will associate with those words. They will conjure up this sensation in your reader. And that's what you're looking for when you're using concrete language and when you're writing poetry, is to conjure up a very particular sensation in your reader. Concrete language makes your reader see exactly what you want them to see. So everyone who comes to your poem sees pretty much the same thing, and in fact senses exactly what you want them to sense, be it sight, sound, touch, taste, or smell. And ideally in poetry, you're going to be able to evoke all of those senses, or as many as you can, in your reader, to try to involve them as much as possible in your writing. That will transport your reader into the world of your poem and make them experience exactly what you want them to experience. So let's take a look at an example of something abstract and generic. We have the sentence here: she moved into the building. So this is not great. She moved into the building has a number of abstractions: moved, building, and even she. A reader might see any number of things when they read this sentence. And that's not what we want. If the building has already been described fully, if the person has already been described fully, maybe you could get away with this, but even in that case, you're better off evoking senses in your reader and making them see exactly what you want. So let's try to change this up a little bit. So from she, we move to weeping gray-haired woman. So the weeping gray-haired woman moved into the building. This is already far more specific. And if you've described the building, again, maybe you don't need to do it here. Maybe this is all you want to do. Maybe you want to focus on the fact that the weeping gray-haired woman is the focus of the sentence. But we can do better. Weeping gray-haired woman clad in black moved into the building. So now, not only do we know what the woman is doing, what her hair color is, which gives us maybe an idea of her age. We also know that she's wearing black. And from this description, we might have an idea of what's going on in this sentence. Now, we change the word building to morgue, and it gets more clear what kind of emotion we have in our sentence, what kind of emotion we might be trying to evoke with this scene. But morgue is a little boring, so let's try playing with that some. What if we make it a yellow morgue? So the weeping gray-haired woman clad in black moved into the yellow morgue. This is okay. I'm still bothered by the word moved, which is pretty abstract. And also the morgue being yellow is problematic because this kind of stands out. Yellow is not the color that I associate with morgues. Maybe Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe, I mean, morgues can be whatever color, really. But the word yellow is kind of sunny, kind of too cheery for what we're looking for with the rest of this sentence. So I traded that out. The weeping gray-haired woman clad in black moved into the whitewashed morgue. So now we have all neutral tones, gray, black, and white, are used in this sentence. So we have this sort of drab scene here that's sort of depressed. It goes along with weeping. It goes along with the emotion that we might expect this person to have in this scene. We've done that just by adding some adjectives, describing the building as being a morgue, but then describing these things as weeping, gray-haired, clad in black, and then whitewashed. Okay, so we can make it a little more appealing to the senses by adding in a scent here, breathing the bitter scent of formaldehyde and bleach. So our morgue now has a scent and kind of a taste. Scent and taste are very closely linked. Scent is the sense that's most associated with memory. So if you are trying to evoke memories in your readers, scent is the way to get at it. But here, that bitter, the word bitter describes not only a scent but also a taste. So you're appealing to that that sensation as well when you have the sense of smell. So this is pretty good, other than this word moved. What does moved mean? Well, it could mean any number of things. The weeping gray-haired woman clad in black flew into the whitewashed morgue, breathing the bitter scent of formaldehyde and bleach. Well, unless we're dealing with a fantasy or science fiction poem here, we know that a woman isn't going to be flying into a morgue. So really this is figurative language that means that she ran in quickly. The weeping gray-haired woman clad in black flew into the whitewashed morgue, breathing the bitter scent of formaldehyde and bleach. So she's rushing into the morgue. Okay, I can get behind that. The weeping gray-haired woman clad in black skipped into the whitewashed morgue, breathing the bitter scent of formaldehyde and bleach. So this one is hard to imagine. I don't know why anyone would be skipping in this situation. I suppose it's possible. It is unlikely, especially if they're actually sad about this. And the word skipped, that verb doesn't really go with the rest of our sentence. We've got this bitter, this gray, black, and white. Yeah, skip doesn't work here. Ran into the whitewashed morgue. Now this is a little bit better. Flew I like more than ran, because flew has the connotation of rushing, being in a hurry, more of a hurry than running. For whatever reason, it has that connotation in my head. But this is what I settled on in building this sentence of concrete language. The weeping gray-haired woman clad in black stumbled into the whitewashed morgue, breathing the bitter scent of formaldehyde and bleach. So the word stumbled helps us understand, and in this version of the sentence, helps us understand that this woman is not entirely in control. She's weeping, she's distressed, and weeping maybe so hard that she didn't see a step, or she is not, for whatever reason, she isn't moving carefully and is unable to control her feet completely. She is so overcome with grief that she's stumbling into this morgue. Okay. So we've moved from she moved into the building to specify who she is, what she's wearing even, how she moved into the building, and what the building is like. Okay, so here we've already looked at some figurative language. Flu is figurative language. Breathing in instead of smelling, those are a little figurative. But here, we're going to have another example. They were happy. We can change this to use a simile, which is figurative language. They were as happy as blank. Now, if I were going to go the cliched route, I would maybe say they were as happy as a clam. Cliche, though, is an overused expression, which means that people have heard these cliches and used them so frequently that they almost don't mean anything anymore. So you should avoid them unless you have a specific reason for using the cliche. Like if you have someone speaking in dialogue, for instance, people definitely use cliches, and I've heard people say as happy as a clam in real life. If you remember the Komunyaku line, the speckled eggs as blue as rage, in the video I was talking about how if you asked 100 people to complete the phrase as blue as blank, you'd get a lot of as blue as the sky, as blue as the ocean, as blue as the sea, stuff like that. Those descriptions, blue as the sky, blue as the sea, those are also cliched, but people still use them. So again, if you're writing dialogue or saying what someone else says, you will see cliches, and it's fine to use them in that case. Here, though, we don't have to use that. We can write something like, they were as happy as a child on the first day of summer. So this, to my mind, and when I was writing this, I was trying to conjure some specific emotions in a reader. It's happy, yes, but it's more specific than that. It has, for me anyway, the idea of freedom. The first day of summer, school is out. You can do what you want. You don't have homework anymore. Maybe you have chores to do, but you're on your own time far more than you were when you were in school. Maybe the idea of vacation, good weather in the summer. You can play around, have fun. All of those things are contained, or I was thinking of all of those things when I made this. They were as happy as a child on the first day of summer. Concrete, figurative language simile. So generally, that's funny. Generally, the more specific you are, the more control you have over what the reader can sense. And when I say sense here, I mean sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. And the more control you have over the reader's senses, the more involved they are in your writing, the more they have moved into the world that you are creating. And the more involved they are, the more control you have over their emotions, which is the goal in poetry, is to make your reader feel what you want them to feel, to make them feel what your speaker is feeling or what the people in your poem are feeling. And you'll be using this again in fiction and again in creative nonfiction. Anytime you have the chance to make things specific, you should take it, because it involves the reader more in what you are writing and helps the piece, the creative piece, whatever it may be, affect your reader more deeply. So I have an exercise for you. Let's see if we can bring this up. Okay, so if we go to the Blackboard page, click on short writing exercises, we've got week 2 exercise. Bring this up. I'm asking you to write 25 vivid, concrete sentences about your shoes. They don't have to be connected sentences. You don't have to tell a story about your shoes in 25 sentences. Just be concrete, be vivid, appeal to as many of the senses as you can. I wrote here that you should be careful with smell and taste, but the rest of them should be pretty easy. In fact, don't taste your shoes. I'll come out and say it. Don't taste your shoes. Smell, okay. Just be careful with that one. Anyway, take a look at this short exercise. Remember that when you're doing these, just save all of the short writing exercises in one document. You'll be turning it in at the end of the semester. Sorry I wasn't more clear about that with the last exercise. But yeah, if you have any questions about this, let me know. The presentation is going to be posted to Blackboard very shortly, if it isn't there already. And yeah, I guess let me know.